doing a voice of the customer study, it's not at all uncommon to identify 100 or more individual customer needs. They're, of course, extremely detailed, and that's actually the level of detail that you need to aim for to do a really complete voice of the customer study. However, most people in the field would simply tell you that for engineers and product development teams to deal with 100 unique needs is just overwhelming and frankly, completely impractical. So what has always been done in the field is the creation of something referred to as an affinity diagram, a technique that's actually borrowed from the old quality movement, TQM, back in the 70s and 80s. And it's just a fancy sort of academic sounding word for bucketing the needs, organizing them into groups that somehow logically go together. And you've probably all been through the technique where you put all the needs on separate yellow stickies and you put them up on a wall, and the group goes through this exercise where they organize them into groups. Now, when Abby Griffin and John Hauser were doing their initial research for the famous Voice of the Customer paper, Abby asked a very interesting question, which is, gee, since this affinity diagram is almost always created by the internal product development team themselves, I wonder if customers will organize the needs the same way that the internal team does. So she did some parallel experimentation, and guess what? They don't. So Abby advocated that we probably ought to go with the customer hierarchy, customer-created hierarchy, rather than the internally created hierarchy. And her hypothesis is that the reason that the difference emerges is because when people inside the company are doing the sorting, what's sort of operating in the back of their mind is it's a reflection of their org chart, because they're thinking about how the product was made or created. And so they're thinking about departments. And so they're thinking, this is Sue's department, and this is Tom's department, and this is John's department. The customer, of course, doesn't know or care about your org chart. What's in the back of their mind is how they acquire and then use or experience the product or service. So that's the construct they use when they create them. An interesting example, almost every time I've done some kind of a computer system, I've found that people inside the company create separate buckets for what they call hardware problems versus software problems. Well, the customer has no idea and doesn't care whether it's a hardware problem or a software problem. It's some kind of a functional problem to them. And so customers almost never make that distinction when they sort the needs. And so in all of our work, we've used one of two techniques to have the customers create this affinity diagram.